Hello everyone, and welcome to our week 4 video announcements. I promise this won't be as long as last week. I don't have to go through each video individually like I did last time, and I don't have to explain the project. But just as a reminder, so we're going into week 4. As usual, you will have a study guide, quiz, and discussion post due by Sunday, 11:59 p.m. Of course, you should send me the password from this video by Tuesday, 11:59 p.m. Now, the schedule itself is pretty simple. Monday, we're going to be looking at the Wars of the Reformation. Remember, you don't have to view those videos Monday. I just suggest you do. That way you're not trying to do everything at once. And then the atomic bombing of Japan, like I said earlier, we're going to look at that in very, very in-depth way. We're going to look very, very closely at that so you can understand all the different details, so you can understand the complexity, right? Because you'll see, the Americans will do something, the Japanese will understand it one way, even though the Americans intended it another way, and they'll react, and the Americans might misunderstand and react to that, and it gets really complex, and that's part of what makes it so interesting. Remember, your atomic bomb rough draft position paper is due by Thursday of week 5, right? So wanted to give you a few days, but remember, you're going to do a study guide based on the atomic bombing of Japan, parts 1, 2, and 3, and then you'll have this atomic bomb position paper that you write based on your study guide. So you may want to go ahead and get to work on it. It's up to you, but I do want to give you that reminder. So now let's look at the actual videos and readings. So the wars, when I say wars of the Reformation, I'm talking about wars that come out of the Protestant Reformation that begins 1517 or so is often given, the year given. But that's where the Catholic Church is going to kind of break up, and you're going to have people who stay Catholic and other people who become Protestant. And that will result in some wars and some conflicts. So it's important to look at that. So one thing, the man who is among all people is probably most responsible for the Reformation is someone named Martin Luther. And he had to deal with this question as the leader of this Protestant Reformation. Okay, how are we Protestants going to view war? And what I like about what Luther is thinking about is he's writing for, in this document you're going to read, for common soldiers, right? He's not writing this for a general or a king who's deciding whether or not to go to war. He's writing for soldiers who have to decide, is it okay for me to follow this king or this prince and fight? So I think that's interesting to read. Well, you'll also read Martin Luther's against the murdering, robbing hordes of peasants. So when the Protestant Reformation started and Luther challenged the Catholic Church and said, he says the Catholic Church is wrong a lot of stuff, other people said, you know what, Luther's right. And just as Luther thinks the Catholic Church is incorrect about things, we think that the Bible tells us that the king or these princes are wrong about things, and we should change society. And this often led to rebellions by peasants who read the Bible and said, we need to change society. Luther did not agree with them. Luther wanted to change religion, but not society. So he writes against them. So here's Luther writing why it's wrong for a group of people to go to war. So it's kind of interesting. Here you have Luther writing why it's okay for a group of people to go to war. Here he's writing why it's wrong for another group to go to war, in particular to rebel. The next video is meant to be humorous, so do keep that in mind as you watch that. You can kind of get from the title, the medieval communist death cult. Technically speaking, it's not medieval. This is the 16th century, so we're in kind of the Renaissance Reformation era. But in any case, that is meant to be humorous, but it does show us how the Reformation could lead to rebellions, and this is kind of an interesting one. One thing I kind of regret, there's only so much stuff we can do in a class, there's only so much time we can spend on different work, on different activities, and so forth. And one thing that I think is unfortunate is that we don't get to spend as much time as I'd like with actual pacifists. Well, this document, the excerpt from the Schleitheim Confession, this confession here means a confession of faith, right? Doesn't mean they're saying we did something wrong. It's saying our group of Christians, this is what we believe. Now, they just call themselves Christians, but this is basically like the people who would become what we call Mennonites or Amish, those sorts of Christians who reject war as not Christian, who say war is wrong. So as you read this, keep in mind this is a pacifist document, and they're explaining why they think Christians should not be able to fight. Now, they recognize themselves in this document as the only true Christians. They'll say, what about, because so if you read this, you'll be like, well, wait a second, there's other people here besides this group. They just are, when they say Christians, they mean themselves. Another war of religion that broke out were the French wars of religion between Catholics and Protestants. It's very complex and very confusing, and I want us to watch a video on it because it shows us something about how religion and power could mingle with each other. Sometimes people view religion and power as like two different things, but religion and power can often go together just fine. And then we'll watch a couple videos about the 30 Years' War. This is the battle that started the 30 Years' War, and it gives you kind of an understanding of generally what's happening. What the causes, what the origins of the war were. And the 30 Years' War is fascinating because it starts off as a fight between Catholics and Protestants, but then it ends up just basically being a fight between different Catholic powers. So it starts off as a religious war, but then becomes a war that's primarily secular. And what's interesting here is you learn, I think, one of the best words of the English language, defenestration. Defenestration is a fancy word that means to throw out a window, right? So, if you were to get very angry at your roommate and throw your roommate out the window, you would say, I defenestrated my roommate. And we're going to make that the password. So the password is defenestration. And it's fun because there's actually, they talk about you're going to watch and learn about the defenestration of Prague. Prague is a city in modern-day Czechoslovakia. There's been 2 defenestrations of Prague. I think it's interesting. There's 2 famous historical events in which people are thrown out of windows. I think in each case, everyone survived. Like everyone that got thrown out the window survived. Then there's this video, why was the 30 Years' War so devastating? The 30 Years' War killed something like, I think, 5% of the population of modern day, what would be the equivalent of modern day Germany. So it killed a lot of people. And it's important for us to understand how when war breaks out, it echoes beyond just the battlefield, right? Especially in this time period, right? When you think about people who die in war, it's not just the battlefield. When you think about how people try and survive in war, it's not just the battlefield. And this next video, the siege of Magdeburg, goes along with that. And it talks about how people endured the battlefield. And I like this because it shows, this one about the Battle of White Mountain gives us a sense of the broad view. But this video, the Siege of Magdeburg, shows you what individuals were going through. We then will switch to Japan and the atomic bombings. And I'm not going to go through each one of these videos. I just want to give you kind of an idea. The first video, the Spiritual Mobilization Campaign, gives us a sense of how religion played a role in the Japanese Empire and in the militarization of Japan. We then have a video clip about Pearl Harbor because that's how the United States and Japan kind of get into war. There'll also be a video about the kamikaze. This gives you a sense of what Japanese war was like and how the Japanese were fighting this war. And it also shows how Japanese people understood the war in religious terms. Then we kind of skip ahead to the year 1945 because that's the kind of the immediate context in which the decision to drop the atomic bomb be made. So we look at this American-Japanese strategy, and we're going to keep looking at videos that give us a sense of that. This video clip is on firebombing, which is the use of napalm, and it's kind of the precursor to the atomic bombs. And by the way, and I can give people, there's a really good podcast. If anyone's interested, do email me. I'll be happy to share it. This is a book I just purchased. This is what what can I say? I read this for my own interest, right? This is like my hobby. This book called The Bomber Mafia that talks about the decision to use kind of mass bombing raids. But this is an interesting video that will help you kind of understand what's going on. Make sure that you pay attention to all the names that you're being given, like Nami, Suzuki, Kido, Oppenheimer. Those names can appear on the quiz, right? So make sure that you get that. And one thing that's also very important, the reason I want you to know these different names in part, when people look at the decisions a country makes, they'll often treat that country like it was a single person, right? So they'll say, Japan decided to do this, Well, there's no such thing, in a sense, called Japan that has like a brain and makes decisions. There's a government of Japan made up of different people who may disagree. So, for example, Anami, Suzuki, and Kido will often argue with each other, right? Oppenheimer and Groves, they're Americans, not Japanese, but they disagree with each other. So it's important to kind of keep that in mind as you're watching this. Burns and Sizzlard here get into a big argument near the end of the meeting. So it's just something to kind of to keep in mind as you're thinking about your atomic bomb paper. And it just goes on to talk about how the war was, what it was like, and so forth. There is one video clip, the Barefoot Gen Hiroshima anime. This is a clip made by, or this is an animation created by a Japanese man. He was a boy at the time, but he was a teenager who experienced the atomic bomb, who lost family members in the atomic bomb. And I highly encourage you to watch it, because this is an attempt to show what the actual blast would have been like from the perspective of the people who endured it. I don't require it because it is extraordinarily graphic. So you don't have to watch it. It's just, there's nothing you have to write there. I'm just got it there because I would encourage you to watch it. But yeah, so you would just keep watching this stuff. Video. White Light, Black Rain. These are two fairly long clips, but I'm mostly just asking for a kind of summary from you. I don't have a whole lot of specific questions. Then there are a couple readings. One of these is called An Opinion on Hiroshima. This is a argument against the atomic bomb. And I use it not to kind of try and make you pro or anti-bomb, but because it's a very religious argument. And we're looking at this kind of question of religion and warfare. So this is someone making an active religious argument. So I want people to kind of think about it. And then Takashi Nagai was a Japanese Catholic who was trying to make sense of the fact that the second atomic bomb blew up in Nagasaki and killed, if I recall correctly, I think there was about 10,000 Catholics, killed about 8,000 of them, I think. It destroyed most of the Catholic community. The atomic bomb that blew up over Nagasaki actually blew up over the Catholic cathedral. And so it was especially devastating to Japanese Catholics. And he had this kind of question, okay, why did this happen? And again, so much of this class is focused on war, like the actual conflict, and how religion can shape or even encourage that conflict. It's also kind of good to think about how religion can help bring harmony, how it can help people forgive, how it can bring reconciliation. So during World War II, many Koreans were forced to go to Japan and work there. Korea was a colony of Japan. And some of them died there, and their bodies have been just recently discovered. And this is an excerpt from a video that talks about how Japanese and Koreans were working to take those bodies back from Japan and bring them to Korea, right? Return these Korean bodies of Koreans who died during World War II working in Japan. And this is only an excerpt from it, but it's interesting. They have some Buddhist priests trying to help reconcile and bring peace between Japanese people and Korean people. So interesting stuff, I think. So with all that being said, please do give me the password by 11:59 p.m. Tuesday. And I look forward, as always, to reading your discussions and response papers and all that.